Buys 3 copies of the same game.
You know, I am due for my 4th copy of the game. There's always been a debate surrounding video games. Are they real pieces of art? Do they harm the people who play them? Should they even be something worth celebrating? Considering the years following the dawn of the internet, we've seen more influential people create more influential games. Many of these came into their own during the 7th generation of consoles, where games were looking like large-scale productions out of Hollywood. While many were impressive and gained much praise, the general public still saw video games as nothing to be taken seriously. But in 2013, things made a shift. There were games that released that took the world by storm and were showing a level of production not seen up to that point. BioShock Infinite, Grand Theft Auto 5, Batman Arkham Origins, Gears of War Judgment, LEGO City Undercover, wait, I'm sorry, what? But the one game that I feel changed the landscape for the medium as a whole was The Last of Us. I'll be upfront with everybody. I adore this game. I know. I'm a brave man. There's so much about this game that I love that I didn't really appreciate when it first came out. I actually got it in a bundle when I had to get my PS3 replaced. It came with Arkham Origins, which is really cool, but God, I hate these sleeves. They look so ugly and you can't store them on the shelf in any decent way. I recently bought a new physical copy of the game just so I had the box because wasting money is a fun pastime. I remember so many commercials from this game when it was coming out and my 13-year-old mind could not believe what I was seeing. It was like something out of a movie or a TV show. Zombie media was all the rage at this time, especially The Walking Dead, and this game seemed to capitalize on that wave of popularity. As of last year, The Last of Us would go on to sell 37 million copies worldwide. This wasn't just a fad or a fluke. There was a demand and love for this game. It was so loved that people went and bought a PS3 just to play it, even though the PS4 and Xbox One were just a few months away. That's how much people wanted this game. So much so that they re-released it again on the PS4 with The Last of Us Remastered, and 9 years later, they would re-release it again on the PS5. Yeah, The Last of Us low-key turned into PlayStation's flagship series. It got a bunch of comics, a sequel, and a TV adaptation with HBO. They really like The Last of Us. As of filming this, I still have yet to play part 2. I do own the game. In fact, I actually got it as a bundle when I went to get remastered. I hadn't finished the original game up to that point, so I figured, hey, just play them both back to back. You're not gonna do that? I love this game, but it's not something I can regularly go back and replay. It's very emotionally draining, and considering part 2 is even longer and darker thematically, I just wasn't ready to jump back into the series. Fast forward a few years and we get a full remake of the game for the PS5 called The Last of Us Part 1, partly as a way to generate hype for the HBO series, and also because man, this game cleans up so damn well. The game is already a great looking experience on the PS3, and remastered would boost a few things as well by giving it a better frame rate, but goddamn, part 1 goes so hard in actively remaking everything. Models, textures, lighting, animations. It's a huge improvement and a complete overhaul of the game that cost $70 for some reason. Yeah, that part's kinda lame. I get that they had to do more than just port it over, but like, they had the full design of the game already. The most complex aspect now is just running the game in the same engine that part 2 was built on. I could excuse maybe $50 since it was so much to bring this game over, but if you're hesitant about getting this game, either wait for a price drop on this if you have a PS5, or just get remastered. It's playable on the 5 to begin with, and it has been cheap for the longest time. I'm gonna be using this version to review the game since it's the most recent release, it's virtually the same game, and the visuals are just remarkably better when you look at them side by side. I do want to give a warning that I am gonna be talking about the game with like full spoilers, and to anyone who hasn't either watched the show or played the game, there's a lot of disturbing topics that The Last of Us covers. Now, I won't go into those topics in great detail in this video because have you seen my videos? Fuck the timeline! Do you really trust me with discussing sensitive topics? That said, I'm not going to shy away from those topics either, so if you're likely at all triggered by any depiction of, and again I'm using the full words here, death, abuse, suicide, child soldiers indoctrination, and sexual assault, then you should stop watching this video right now. I just want to give you a full warning going forward. The Last of Us would be developed by longtime PlayStation team Naughty Dog, who have been making games on their systems ever since the mid-90s with Crash Bandicoot. Interesting. I know this is common knowledge to a lot of people, but given my age, I only really learned who Crash was after The Last of Us came out. I will say, I'm glad they don't do any nostalgia pandering in this game specifically.
Let me go! Please.
Whoa! Naughty Dog would continue to develop games for the PS2 with the Jak and Daxter series, and eventually move on to Uncharted with the PS3. This is actually where I was first introduced to the developer. My cousin Max loved this game growing up. He could tell you how much he loved it.
How the hell could a 400-year-old or whatever stop a bullet? What the hell?
Teenagers shouldn't be given cameras. I'm a prime example of that. Development for The Last of Us started around 2009, just after the completion of Uncharted 2. Because of the size of the game and the fact that they wanted to continue the Uncharted series, Naughty Dog would be split into 2 teams for the first time in the company's history, with half the team working on Uncharted 3, while the other half worked on The Last of Us, then codenamed as Project Thing. I'm sure that didn't make things confusing. Sorry, sir, I left Project Thing next to Project This, which is with Project That, not to be confused with Project Those or Project Nothing, which is just the air. This project will be led by game director Bruce Straley and its creative director and writer Neil Druckmann. Druckmann, from what I found, has basically been with Naughty Dog for his entire career, starting as a programmer back on Jak 3, then becoming a designer in Uncharted and co-lead designer for Uncharted 2. That is one hell of a climb up the grapevine, unless he murdered all the other grapes as he ascended. Bruce Straley, damn, this guy has been around for a while, starting back in '92, mainly working as an artist for a few Genesis games like X-Men, which I actually own as a matter of fact, and Mr. Straley, that art, that's some good art. Apparently they were tasked with making another Jak and Daxter game, and they decided, no! And then they picked The Last of Us instead. I may have done the same thing. Alright, let's get this started. We load up the game and why is this such a common thing? Does the game really need that big of an update? I already own the disc. Isn't everything already meant to be on here? The game is already 79 gigs out of the box. I mean, does this really need to be over 100? I mean, who spends over 100 gigs on one game? Okay, fair point. We begin the game with a young girl named Sarah asleep in Texas. That's the scariest part of this game so far. I'm pretty sure being in Texas warrants an M rating by itself. We see her wake up to her father Joel. It's his birthday. This'll be a good day. I gotta be honest, I love the immediate chemistry between these two. Their jokes and jabs at each other are really cute to watch. But all good things have to come to an end. If you know, you know. As it's time for Sarah to go to sleep.
You know that, baby girl.
No, that's not the end, despite how Joel wishes it would be. If you know, you know! Sarah wakes up and walks around the house. It's empty, it's dark, it's full of a lot of background details for you to find. Jumping the gun a bit, the game does this a lot to add to the world building. There are a ton of notes and trinkets you can add to your journal to read upon. I'll highlight some other more interesting ones, but oh no! Dad's missing! Not the first time I've said that. He's not in his room, he's not in the kitchen, the news says there's some bad stuff going on. Maybe he's out the window.
What was that?
I'm sure that's fine. Oh, look, there he is. Hi, Dad. That's so like him. So yeah, if it weren't obvious already, we got a zombie situation on our hands, and it's handled very grounded and scary. If it seems like I'm front-loading a lot of my jokes, it's because I am. This game is really, really serious. It's hard to find appropriate jokes to make during scenes like this.
Who do you think you're doing? Keep driving.
I got a kid, Joel.
So do we.
But we have room.
Keep driving, Tommy. You ain't seen what I seen. Someone else will come along.
You should have helped him.
This moment in the car is really cool though. You don't do anything except move the camera around, but the confined space and continuous madness makes this one of the most suspenseful and immersive moments in the game. You're constantly waiting for something to just pop out and get you. Well, I was waiting for that. The same goes for this moment where we're in control of Joel as he carries an injured Sarah. Again, you don't do anything but move in this part, but the tension is so high and the chaos in the streets is so good. Man, this game is gorgeous, and this is only the beginning. Although I do have to wonder what's playing in the movie theater today. If they were watching a zombie movie, would this be scary? Or really good theming? Oh look, the military, they'll help us. Oh right. It's Texas. But oh god, Sarah got shot. If you know, you... Actually, wait, now you know. Yeah, I'm sorry for making so many jokes. This is genuinely a really freaking sad moment. And I think this is the part that helped cement this game for a lot of people as more than just a game. Within the first 20 minutes of playing, the game got so many people to care about Sarah and actually tricked us by having her be the first character you play as. Everyone who played this game when it came out in 2013 had the same reaction. This is a really powerful moment, and the way it's directed and acted just makes it hurt so much more. And the crazy thing is, this is just the prologue. We get some quick information during the opening credits that explain that the zombie infection going around is caused by a fungus called cordyceps, and these things are a genuinely scary concept due to their real-world influence. They're based on actual fungi that can infect other plants and insects. The details of how these work are greatly explored more in the HBO series, but effectively, their whole purpose is to infect its host and spread as far as it can go. You lose complete control of your body and are just part of the hive mind that has one goal: to grow. I even like that they're not even called zombies in this game. The infected isn't a super creative name, but trust me, the different types you run into more than make up for that. Anyway, it's now 20 years later. Am I the only one who finds it funny that every time jump in every piece of media has a hard round number to it? It's always 10 years or 20 years or... Yeah, that. Also, can we appreciate how fucking good the lighting is? My god, it's so good! Again, the original version looked great, but damn, this puts it on a whole nother level. Anyway, we get introduced to Tess. She's Joel's friend. Well, I hope it works out for them. Seems they got some bad news, though. They got screwed over by a man they smuggle for named Robert after he apparently sold all the guns that they bought from him. Now, in all fairness, I could see why that happened. You know, I meant to buy 2 and I accidentally clicked 2,000. I love that these two don't have a plan except just walk up to Robert and kill him. It's honestly the most video gamey part that happens, considering how much they emphasize the survival aspect. That much is apparent from the quarantine zone, and damn, the amount of detail in this section is crazy. It's just a straight line, so there's not that much to explore, but I love how dense the environmental storytelling is here, and the rest of the game for that matter. I love all these little vendors that sell all kinds of different stuff. The kid guarding her toy is hella sad, but also really funny. I like to think she's secretly the most violent character in the game. Anyway, we find Robert's base and go up against some hired goons.
Hired goons?
We fight our way through and corner Robert, who tells us he sold off the guns to the Fireflies, an anti-government faction who rebel against the remaining military powers that were formed after the outbreak. Joel and Tess take it well. Now, it could have been worse. It could have been 3 bullets. But it's all good, since they meet the leader of the Fireflies, Marlene, who gives them a job. Smuggle some cargo, and they get their guns, plus a little extra. Little do they know, the cargo in question turns out to be a young girl named Ellie, who once they help smuggle out of the QZ, discovers that she's not only infected, but also seems immune to the infection as well. She's got a 3-week-old bite mark that hasn't moved, leading Joel and Tess to realize that she's being used for a potential cure. The two are obviously skeptical, and Joel more so, but they see that she's a valuable asset to the Fireflies, and as such they would be able to get a good payday out of it. They go through a really cool section where you have to navigate through a fallen building. This is such a great set piece for this point in the game. We dodge some infected, work around some Federal Fedra soldiers until we reach the drop-off point. Well, that was a good 2 hours. I guess the game must be done. Some others definitely are. But oh no, the Fireflies are dead! It must have been the Shadow Man. And to make things worse, we discovered that while getting here, Tess got bit by one of the infected and it's spreading like crazy. This sucks for her, but it does fully confirm that Ellie is actually immune to the infection, and getting her to the Fireflies is more important than they initially realize. Despite Joel's digressions and Ellie's pleas, Tess stays behind to slow down the upcoming Fedra soldiers, leaving only Joel to be the one to take Ellie. Yeah, sorry. Again, it's really hard to make this stuff funny considering it's really well done. I feel bad for Tess, despite us not spending much time with her. I think it's her desperation after seeing the Fireflies dead is what got me. She was the level-headed one between her and Joel, and this is the only time she gets this emotional in the game, and you know this matters a lot. I also love the fact that Ellie is the one to figure out that she got infected, considering she's the only person who understands what that fear and uncertainty feels like. Joel's reaction, though, is a bit much.
Oh, Christ.
I want that as a reaction for everything. I want to press a button and have that clip appear.
Oh, Christ.
Now, Joel and Ellie have to make their way from town to town trying to find some way to get to the Fireflies. And that's more or less what takes up the rest of the game. Yeah, after Tess dies, it's really just a game of where's the Fireflies? I guess they're here. Oops, no they're not. And then you go on to the next location. The Last of Us could be considered very episodic in a way. Oh, wait a minute. The main goal stretches out across the entire game, but what happens on the path makes things more difficult for our characters. Every place they stop, or are forced to stop in some cases, has something that just makes life worse for Ellie and Joel. It's not too bad initially as we make our first stop at an acquaintance of Joel's, Bill. I love the buildup of this guy, just by going through his town and seeing how many traps he's made. And when you see him, he's the kind of eccentric survivalist you'd expect him to be. I will say it's weird seeing this version of Bill after seeing the TV series, since these are more or less completely different characters. Bill is very boisterous, doesn't trust anybody, and to really rub salt in the wound, his partner Frank hated his guts so much that he left, got bit, and hung himself. Again, if you've seen the TV series, you would know that that's the exact opposite of how these two were portrayed. It really kind of goes to show how you could take the same two characters, completely change their motivations, and still get something really compelling. This version of Bill isn't as emotionally gripping as the series, but he's still no less entertaining. This one line he says is something that me and my friend quote way too much.
Well, it is a joke. Joel needs a car.
I don't know why, but the way W. Earl Brown performs that line just kills me. It's also so cool that we get to see Joel let his guard down a little bit and try to be sympathetic to Bill. After the prologue, we see Joel as this matter-of-fact, no-nonsense kind of guy, and now we see a bit of his humanity peek through, and that extends to his interactions with Ellie. The scene of them in the car encapsulates what I love about these two. It's the stern parent and rebellious kid figures you've seen before, but the way they finally start to act normal around each other is really nice, especially after Tess dies and Joel lays down the ground rules. This adds levity to help strengthen their connection. Also, this is still one of the funniest scenes in any video game ever made.
Now, Ellie, that ain't for kids.
Whoa! How the hell would he even walk around with that thing?
Get rid of that.
Well, hold your horses. I want to see what all the fuss is about. Oh, why are these all stuck together? I'm just fucking with you.
I've been there, Bill. I spill hot glue on things all the time. That looks way more sensual than I expected it to be. Oh look, they're heading for Pittsburgh. Glad to see nothing's changed. Okay, as someone who grew up in that city, it is cool to see it as a playable environment in a video game, even if the terrain is very much incorrect. Believe you me, I know where the Warner Theater is, and it does not have a view of the Fort Pitt Bridge. I've been in Georgia for a year, and I still know that for some reason. Oh look, a local. Well, so much for the car. We drove from the outside of Boston to Pittsburgh, so it was about less than 10 hours. And you need to go to... Oh, no! Yeah, sure, we'll make it on foot. That's how the pioneers did it.
The pioneers used to ride these babies
for miles.
So yeah, we're stuck in Pittsburgh.
Well, leave it here!
And now we get attacked by a gang who wants us dead. Are you sure we're not in Philly? Plot-wise, this is the most boring part of the game in my opinion. It's just a group of raiders who took over some military equipment. It looks cool and scary, but by now we've gone up against so many infected that it doesn't really seem too threatening now. The biggest thing of note we run into is a man named Henry and his little brother named Sam who are trying to get out of the city. All of them collectively are like, alright, 4 people is better than 2. Henry and Sam are fine characters. Henry is kind of a dick if I'm being honest. He snaps at Sam a lot, and I know he's just trying to look out for him. It just feels kind of weirdly forced at points. I feel like I don't really get a strong connection to how they feel as brothers, since Sam doesn't really get to do much outside of some occasional moments with Ellie, which are cute to see. My favorite moment has to be this part where Henry tells Sam to put down a toy and leave it, and during the gameplay, if you actually look at Ellie, she stands by the toy but doesn't move, and when you look away and look back, you hear her backpack unzip, and then the toy is gone. And I love that they pay that off later on when she gives it to him. It's so sweet. But we keep going and have to get through a security gate. And when we get caught, Henry just leaves Joel behind and almost takes Ellie with him. Yeah, I'm sorry. I get it's a dog-eat-dog world, but come on. We've been doing so much of the work up to this point. Helps that I have the controller.
This is my world!
Even Ellie thinks that's shitty of them to do and jumps back down. Guess who's not getting that toy, Henry? Great, now we're getting chased down the bridge by a bunch of gun-toting jackasses. These guys must be from Mercer. Thankfully, we escape by jumping off the bridge. Please don't try this at your home bridge. And we even get rescued by Henry. Oh, that was nice of him. Still a dick, though. It's okay, they reconcile and move on.
I wish I could do that.
Oh, look at this lovely neighborhood.
Get out!
You know, the price is really nice, but the resale value is just not ideal. This is easily the most fun part of the Pittsburgh section. Just trying to stealthily get past everyone without dying or getting hit by a sniper. It's good tension, and our reward for completing it is getting to take place of the sniper and covering our friends as they run from the raiders. Ooh, that was a good hit. Hey, get the hell off of them. If you want an autograph, you gotta get in the back of the line. And now, I genuinely don't want to make any jokes here. All seems good and calm, but we see that Sam just isn't himself, even throwing away the toy Ellie saved for him. And that's because he got bit and knows there's only a few hours left before the infection spreads. When they all wake up, Ellie is the one to find out what happened, with Henry almost shooting Joel when he goes for the gun, and then Henry kills Sam almost without hesitation. And what follows is something that messed up everyone who played this game. I want to give a warning right now. This moment depicts suicide. So if you are not comfortable seeing that or other similarly dark themes in this game, I'm going to tell you right now, please stop watching. Everything else we see in this game is similarly triggering for different reasons, so I just wanted to give you a heads up if you got this far and are realizing it's too much for you. Henry, realizing what he did, turns the gun on his head and shoots himself. The tension and suddenness of this scene makes it hit really hard. We grew to like Henry and Sam, and to see these two die so unceremoniously is a real punch to the gut. I really think Sarah's death and this scene are what showed most people that this game isn't going to play around. It wants to depict these tragedies as real and grounded as possible. Even the way it transitions hits hard. We don't linger on their deaths, but immediately cut to black, and we show we're in fall time, as if to signify that death is so common in this world that the story and characters just move on without a second thought. That is, Joel does, but Ellie is still clearly shaken up from her given dialogue during this section of the game. This helps reinforce why her survival is so important, as her immunity could be the key to curing this infection, and the people she sees die give her immense guilt since she can't be infected like everybody else. Man, how'd the Joker put it?
That's not funny. That's not...
I really underestimated how not funny this game is. Here's Joel playing darts. Anyway, we're headed over to meet up with Joel's brother Tommy. Tommy is actually a character we met at the very beginning of the game. He's the one who drove the truck and saved Joel from the soldier. And through moments of dialogue, we learned that the brothers had a falling out that left them estranged for a few years, partly owed to the fact that Tommy used to be a member of the Fireflies. After a bit of swimming and Ellie floating, we reach a compound being upheld by armed guards. But guess who's there?
He's my goddamn brother.
Tommy.
Yep, By the biggest of coincidences, we find Tommy, who's not only married since his time away from Joel, but is also the head of a massive community in the town of Jackson. Living off the land, having a huge power supply, tons of resources. Damn, Joel, you lucked out with the more successful younger sibling. Jesus, next thing you'll tell me Tommy outlives Joel. How did that get up there? We help them get the generator working again as Joel asks if Tommy can take Ellie to the Fireflies. Tommy is obviously apprehensive of all this, until he's told about Ellie's immunity and how he can tell Joel's feelings of Ellie are making the journey harder for him to be as efficient. One of the last times they saw each other was when Joel lost his daughter, and now there's a good chance he may lose another. This, however, doesn't sit right with Ellie, as she thinks that Joel's abandoning her, making her take a horse and run off. Joel and Tommy catch up with her, and what transpires is easily the most iconic scene from this game. Yes, more than Sarah's death, more than the ending, more than any moment of gameplay here. This moment between Ellie and Joel is directed and performed to near perfection. The tension between these two is so powerful as Ellie calls out Joel for thinking she's like Sarah, and how he's not the only one to have lost people. You can see where Joel's coming from as he feels she would be safer with Tommy, but that's not what she needs. The bond she formed with Joel is stronger and more secure than someone who may be practically safer to be with. This line right here encapsulates Ellie's character so well and is delivered perfectly by Ashley Johnson.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
That right there is the core of Ellie's character at this point. Someone who has never had any real family or support system, and is more scared of being alone than by being attacked by infected or any other dangers the new world provides. Joel sees this and obviously changes his mind. A little too quickly, if I'm being honest. I think his turn is made a little bit weaker since his decision isn't focused on that much. After that great scene, we are immediately thrown into a section where we have to fight off some raiders. It really doesn't mesh well, as we only get a few seconds of them riding back together before he tells them he's taking Ellie. I think this section needed a bit of a break to take in what happened between these two. Although I do love this moment between Tommy and Joel once he makes his decision.
Your wife kind of scares me. I don't want her coming after me.
We get a tip to head down to the University of Colorado. Yeah, okay, does Google Maps have a horse option? We make our way to the university and, because we just can't have anything nice in this game, it's abandoned. Tommy, you said they would be here.
I lied.
We find a recording that shows the Fireflies once again packed up and moved out further west. I swear, the Fireflies are like a child with their toy. They keep moving to different places when they seem to be done playing.
Mom, there's no more floor.
And on brand, we get ambushed by some raiders, and Joel doesn't like that one bit. They're a real thorn in his side. Or his back, whatever floats her boat. Yeah, Joel isn't looking too good, forcing Ellie to take on the role of caregiver through most of the game's winter portion. Wait, why are we in a mall? Oh, right. Paid content. Yeah, jumping the gun a bit here. There was an added DLC for this game called Left Behind. It was an added side campaign that went into Ellie's backstory. Considering we're in the story part, it only makes sense to talk about this since we're in the part of the game that takes place in between fall and winter. For the plot, Left Behind is a really cool and interesting expansion. As for the gameplay, that did not go as far as I expected. Left Behind flashes back a few weeks before the journey as we meet Ellie's best friend Riley. She sneaks in and suggests that they go out and have some fun while she's back and explore an abandoned mall. There's nothing too pressing that happens while in here. It really is a bunch of fun little optional scenes you can interact with. Playing on the carousel, reading bad puns, pretending to play arcade games.
I love interactive video games.
But much like fucking everywhere else, it gets ruined when they learn that they're infected in the mall, and this is where we get to see how Ellie got her bite. And to rub salt in the wound, Riley was bit too. With no other options they can see, they decide to wait out the infection and die together, and well, we know how that ended up. Well, that's kind of a downer now, isn't it? Anyway, it's winter, the snow is falling, the lakes are frozen, and oh my goodness. That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Now Ellie's in the survival chair, trying to scrap up whatever food and supplies she can get for Joel, who really shouldn't be alive. I mean, how the hell did he survive the stabbing, infection, blood loss, anemia, and the cold? Well, that'll do it. Ellie eventually runs into a person named David. David's a pedophile. Yeah, there's no real way to segue into that fact. He's just a big fucking pedophile, and it's not very subtle how he reveals it. Also, he's a cannibal, tries to kill Joel for defending himself against his men, kidnaps Ellie, and kills my fucking horse. David sucks. I hate him. People give some of the characters in part 2 shit, and my response will always be David exists. He's without a doubt the most despicable character in the game. Honestly, the whole franchise. Everyone hates this guy when they get to this point, and for good reason. His more monstrous traits are explored a bit further in the TV series, but that doesn't make him any less ewy here. While Ellie is kidnapped, we see Joel get enough strength to move again, and this has to be my favorite moment for the character. I know he's being cruel and borderline psychotic here, but I'm sorry, these fuckers deserve it. Also, keep in mind, this is one of the few times we actually ever see an unfiltered Joel. Even in the beginning of the game, Tess usually reined him in and obviously didn't want him to lose it around Ellie. But this scene perfectly shows why Joel is not a person you want to go up against, especially when he's alone. At this point, Ellie attempts to make an escape and is caught by Jared the subway cannibal, and I hate this. And then Ellie... I like this. Oh, thank God, Joel is here. Please get us away from this inhuman creep. Anyway, it's springtime! We finally reached the west, and the location likely to have the fireflies. But things still aren't fully recovered from before. Ellie is noticeably more quiet and timid than she was earlier in the game. And one of the aspects I love about this section is the visual storytelling. You can tell by Ellie's actions just how beat down and tired she is, but they never have them discuss it in great detail. It's subtle inflections and deliveries that make these moments work. Things do brighten up a little bit though when Ellie finds a herd of giraffes. What's a herd of giraffes called? A tower of giraffes. That's hilarious. This moment of sheer childlike wonder looking and interacting with a calm, peaceful nature is so effective in calming everything down from the previous sections. It's one of the most iconic moments from the game for that reason. It's just what the characters and players needed to experience. Now we just have to get to our final destination. Alright, next up we gotta traverse a river underground. Well, that's fun. As long as we don't jump, we should... Oh god damn it, Ellie, this is why we practice swimming. The weather was so good for it. Well, it's okay, the fireflies found us. Well, it's okay, he hit the switch on the back of my head. Marlene found us and already has Ellie prepped for a cure to be made. But there's one problem. The procedure requires they extract from her brain, which means the surgery would end up killing her. Okay, I know times are dire and the fate of the world is at stake, but did no one say this plan out loud and think, something seems a bit off about this? If she dies, who's gonna give more samples to make the cure? What happens if the procedure fails? What if someone realizes you can't cure fungus? Yeah, this is the most contested part of the story. The idea that they can just cure this as if it were a disease. Now, this is a common trope in zombie media, so it would make sense that this would be their first instinct. There's just one problem. The cordyceps aren't an infection or disease, they're parasites. It's not something you can really cure. I think people believe it simply because they were labeled as infected for the longest time, but this isn't an infection. You can't make a whole cure for parasites. If you could, you'd see a lot more of this.
Honey, where are my pills? I got ringworm.
Joel obviously doesn't take this very well, and without a second thought, pulls my favorite reversal I've ever seen.
I said keep walking.
Where's the operating room?
I ain't got time for this.
Where?
I wish I was Sarah's mother. Joel somehow manages to kill an entire building's worth of fireflies and also manages to find Ellie. But not if this doctor has anything to say about it.
Animal!
Well, it's okay. At least his kids don't know about it. We get Ellie out in time and come face to face with Marlene. And this, once again, is a really good and important scene. After she pleads with us, we intercut between Joel driving Ellie away as she wakes up. When she asks what happened, he lies to her and tells her that the Fireflies stopped looking for a cure, all while seeing Joel shoot Marlene in cold blood. And with her final plea for mercy, Joel gives one of the coldest responses I've ever seen.
Let me go. Please.
You just come after her.
Some good first-degree murder. We cut to some time later as they approach Jackson, now cleverly being in control of Ellie during this section, as Joel makes small talk seeming very happy and joyous. Ellie, on the other hand, is still trying to comprehend everything Joel told her so far. This culminates in one final conversation where Ellie tells him how much finding the Fireflies meant to her, and even going as far to mention Riley's death as a big motivator. Joel obviously tries to sympathize and offer his own wisdom, but Ellie asks him this.
Swear to me. Swear to me that everything that you said about the Fireflies is true.
And what's crazy? Joel lies. He says everything he told her about what happened is true, ending with Ellie giving the only response she or anyone else possibly can.
Okay.
If it wasn't obvious enough, I love the story in this game. It's genuinely one of my favorite narratives in any game or media. Me talking about it doesn't really do it justice. This is a game that kind of banks on you experiencing it for yourself. Its world is so rich and full of detail. The characters you come across are every flavor you would need. You get funny, sympathetic, despicable, threatening, familial. It really has all kinds of great variety. This extends to the main cast themselves. I love Ellie and Joel as characters. I really think Joel was the first character in a game that anyone could completely 100% empathize with despite all the horrible stuff he does. In many ways, he's a murderous monster, but the heart he carries underneath, being a father who couldn't save his first daughter, now doing everything he can for his second. It's one of the few times where I don't mind a character like him going to as dark of places as he does, since we get to see all kinds of different sides of him. We see the vengeful and murderous killer while also seeing the gentle, caring man, and Ellie is the kind of person who anchors him perfectly. Ellie is one of my favorite characters in fiction. Her part in the story as the walking MacGuffin has been done before in other zombie media, but her character is so fascinating to watch as you progress. She begins as this loudmouth smartass who always has a witty retort, and progresses into a hardened young woman who sees just how much one has to do to survive in a world like this. I read somewhere that Ellie was supposed to be a bit older, like 18 or 20 originally, but I think having her at such a formative age really helps drive home how the events in this game can really affect people who live through them. A major part of what makes these characters great, though, the casting. Troy Baker as Joel might be my favorite performance from him. Crazy to think, I mean, he has so few to choose from, but the weight and gravity he brings to Joel makes the character feel real. At no point do I ever see a performance. I see and hear Joel. That's a real testament to Baker as an actor. If you ever want a fun game to play, look things up this man has been in and guess the character he plays. I have a good feeling you will always be surprised. But as much as I love him in this game, the real heart of The Last of Us, in my opinion, is Ashley Johnson as Ellie. If it weren't for her, this game would not be nearly as loved. Her performance as Ellie, once again, is one of my favorite performances in any piece of media. Despite being in her late 20s when playing her, she is so convincing as this young, smart-mouthing kid. The progression she goes on as Ellie is so well done, and it makes her scenes with Joel just hit even more hard. It's all the more impressive to me since Ashley has a pretty distinct voice. If you ever played the game I mentioned with Troy Baker but with her instead, you'll recognize her almost immediately. But that doesn't matter since her strength lies in the quality of her performance as opposed to the range of her voice. That's why she's genuinely great in anything she's cast in. When I saw she was cast to play Ellie's mom in the TV series, I went, I fell down. It's really a testament to how good writing and direction can make a story that we've seen probably 1,000 times already feel so fresh and new. The way everything is staged, composed, performed, it really is on par and surpasses some film and TV shows. Well, that was a lot to get through, but I'm happy to say that I was finally able to complete The Last of Us Season 1. Oh. There's gameplay in this movie. Yeah, I feel this is something that doesn't really get talked about that often. When a game has a story as intense and engaging as this, it's pretty easy to forget that the gameplay attached to it is good. Yeah, sorry if I'm not being too descriptive, but the gameplay of The Last of Us is generally well done, and that's kind of about it. I don't want to sell it short. There really is a lot that I do like about it. The game in its purest form is a survival action game. You roam around desolate and abandoned areas, trying your best to conserve your ammo, find supplies, avoid confrontations altogether if you can. It's pretty standard stuff, all things considered. It doesn't really make sense for me to praise things like the controls and whatnot, since yeah, it's a AAA release from PlayStation. I'd have more to say if it didn't control well. You play as Joel for the vast majority of the game, and you get equipped to how he plays in no time. The hand-to-hand combat and gunplay are basically your bread and butter in this game. Just like the last time I made a piece of buttered toast, you really should just never turn away from the stove because, oh Jesus. When you don't have ammo on you, you're left swinging at everything with your fists and whatever blunt instrument you can find around. A pipe, a 2x4, my buddy plank. These get the job done when you're up against one, maybe two guys, but in situations where you have to deal with a group, you gotta rely more on your firearms, and Joel's got some pretty deep pockets. Starting out with nothing more than a basic hand pistol to a complete arsenal of varied firearms. The revolver is awesome. Its firing rate isn't too special, but the power behind it was enough to make it my go-to pistol in the game. The shotgun, I mean, you really can't go wrong with it. Any game that has it, I'm gonna use it. I honestly think it was my most used gun in the game. The rifles are alright whenever you get distance between you and whatever you're shooting at, but most of the time I'll bring it out if I just want to feel different. However, that does change when I upgrade it with the scope, so that makes it a bit more useful. The bow and arrow, man, I really wanted to like this one, but I found no good use for it. I know it's meant to be a silent option, but every time I feel it's worth using, there's always a huge group that sees me shooting it. I don't like the arc it has while aiming, and the wind-up between shots just makes me not want to use it. With one exception, but I'll get to that in a minute. If I'm gonna be stealthy, I'd rather use one of the shivs I find in the world, or choke out an enemy if given the chance. The other variants of the guns are pretty cool, like the pistol with the scope is pretty neat, the single-hand shotgun is awesome and became my go-to option in most encounters. I really want to love the flamethrower. I mean, who wouldn't love that in this game? You see a horde of infected coming after you and then set them ablaze. But the ammo consumption is a bit too fast for my liking. I'm not wild about the range. And it's one of the few weapons you can just straight up miss if you're not looking for it. So much so that I completely forgot about it on my main playthrough and had to snag it when I was doing my New Game Plus run. The automatic rifle is so busted and useful that it only really makes sense you get it in the last area in the game against the Fireflies. This gun is hella useful, but if I'm being honest, it's kind of the most boring weapon aside from the pistol. It's the most gunning gun to have ever gunned a gunning man who guns. It's definitely more fun during New Game Plus when you can upgrade it, but this is just the permanent stuff you can come across while playing. The big thing in this game is scrummaging for materials and parts that basically do anything you want them to. You can make stuff like a shiv that can insta-kill certain enemies or open locked doors so you can get more materials. Pills upgrade your stats just like in real life. You can get gear and scrap metal to upgrade your weapons. This actually introduces a funny difference in the PS5 remake. Since this is made on the engine used for part 2, you get these little animations of Joel messing with the guns whenever you upgrade it, which is pretty nice, since the original and remastered just have it as a menu. Gotta love this logic though. Need to shoot more bullets? Just keep your gun a little scrub-a-dub-dub and voila! You can shoot more than you could before. It worked so well when I tried it. You can use scraps to make other stuff like a Molotov, my personal favorite weapon to use. Just get everyone into a crowd and then med packs, those are pretty standard. These grenades you get from Bill are so useful, but they don't make any sense at all. These are tin cans with gunpowder and scissors stuffed inside, and are also somehow motion triggered. Yeah, I thought these would be like cluster bombs that shatter on impact, but no, they somehow sense whenever there's bad guys nearby and go,
I'm about to bust.
Smoke bombs. Worthless. I found no use for these. I get that they're meant to act as a way for you to make a quick getaway, but when I'm going up against armed guys, they're gonna see me anyway, and against infected, this is useless because of how they work. Yeah, I've mainly been talking about going up against armed guys, but the infected are where the real combat in The Last of Us truly shines, in my opinion. You got two main types of infected. You got runners and clickers. Runners are your standard zombie type. They see you and they make a beeline for you. They're pretty simple to take care of. You shoot them, you hit them, you kiss them, they kiss you back. But clickers, these are the real star of the show. If you ask anyone what's the first thing they think of when they hear The Last of Us, the answer is usually trauma, but more often than not, you'll see people bringing up the clickers. These guys can't see, they can only hear, and that means they can hear anything. Gunshots, footsteps, you name it, they'll hear it. You can't just deal with these guys normally. Unless you have a shiv, if they grab a hold of you, it's instant death. So you have to find creative ways around them. Either you sneak up on them and give them a shiv, line up a shot and kill them when they get close. If you have any melee weapons, you can beat them with it. Or, in many cases, if you're silent enough, you can just ignore them entirely. This is one of the coolest parts about playing The Last of Us. When it comes to the infected, in most cases, you could just avoid the conflict altogether if you're sneaky enough. You can't ignore every encounter, but if you can see a way past everybody, you can take it if you're careful. It also helps since Joel has this listening mode that maps out the area. This is like the most 2010s feature in any game. It's in the Batman Arkham series. I'm sure other games have it. It just feels like every game in this era had an extreme sense mode, regardless of how much it makes sense. This is definitely a case of it making no damn sense at all. It's just here for gameplay, and while that's perfectly fine, it does very much break any sort of immersion that the game is trying to capture. Survival is super important until you remember that you're Toph Beifong, the Melon Lord herself. Higher difficulties do limit this or just outright remove the feature, so it does give you some nice replay value. Although man, as much as I do love this game, I can't really find it in me to replay it over and over again on higher difficulties. The base journey in and of itself is a pretty draining experience when combining with the story and the survival elements. It's not really a game that I can just sit down and unwind while playing. I need to be in a certain mood to replay The Last of Us. Or if I'm playing New Game Plus, find different ways to break it. Yeah, on my second playthrough, I wanted to see what everything was like, and then I discovered you can just turn on infinite ammo, which is just a fun time in any game it's in. It's really a good way to mess around with some of the weapons you wouldn't normally get, like the assault rifle. You also have access to a ton of costumes to choose from. I went with the outfits for part 2 because I love pissing off people who are bad at discourse. This also gave me a chance to try out some different modes in the game, mainly performance and fidelity. I've made it clear in my Canna video that I generally prefer performance modes in any game that offers them as an option, but for some reason, The Last of Us just kinda looks more natural in 30 FPS to me. It's weird, so the original ran at 30, remastered also ran at 30, but it gave you the option to run it at 60. There's no other difference between the modes. I don't know why they wouldn't just have it locked at 60 anyway, but then I messed around with it on part 1, and I gotta say, I actually prefer it in 30. The lower frame rate gives the game a more cinematic quality that fits the style a bit more than in 60, which looks more like a video game. That being said, it doesn't really impact gameplay at all from my experience. I prefer 60 in something like Canna because that game requires fast reaction times and button presses. This game isn't really the same case. It can get a bit hectic, certainly, but the overall pace of the gameplay is a bit slower than most games usually are. I do think this works both to the game's benefit and, unfortunately, its detriment. I've heard this discussion a lot, that The Last of Us is one of the most cinematic games ever made. I don't really agree with that. It certainly has cinematic elements from how its story is structured, how the scenes are directed and covered. It has a lot of those same qualities. It's just that a lot of those elements are shown in the cutscenes, but not necessarily through the gameplay. When you're not engaged in combat or watching a story scene, then The Last of Us just kinda becomes a walking simulator. Most of the areas you play are extremely linear. You can find some secrets hidden in rooms or side areas, but a lot of what you do in the game is walk and occasionally hear Ellie and Joel talk to each other, and that's kind of about it. The stuff you actually do in the world isn't really that interesting. You gotta find a way up. Oh look, a convenient ladder. You need to help Ellie across the river. Oh look, a convenient platform for her to sit on. There are only 2 areas in this game where that doesn't really apply. Boston, because it's the first area outside the QZ, so it actually encourages you to explore the entire area, and also the winter chapter. Playing as Ellie is already a good enough change since she has less weapons and combat options than Joel, but she moves faster and is placed in this huge area. This section is where the stealth gameplay shines the most in my opinion, since you definitely do not have enough firepower to take care of everybody, and that requires you to be more creative with how you navigate. It's actually one of the few areas where I got the most use out of the bow and arrow. It's not only geniusly designed so you can get through it fairly, but the way everything is constructed feels like an actual lived-in environment you're moving through. I love this, but not every area is designed this way, or even has you play in interesting ways. I really do think this game has a problem with balancing its focus on narrative and its focus on gameplay. The section that takes place in Jackson with Tommy is the second most glaring case of this in the game. You start off by walking to the destination, doing really menial and mundane puzzles where you could be a dick to Ellie.
Hey, be careful crossing that thing. Teamwork.
I will.
Really? Just gonna leave me hanging? All right. I see how it is.
You finally meet up with Tommy and then walk and talk some more, watch a cutscene, walk some more, watch a cutscene, and then the game is like, oh right, the controller, and has raiders coming out of nowhere just so we can fight them. I really think there was a better way of balancing this because those raiders don't come back or add anything to the story. Then it's back to walking in cutscenes until Ellie leaves and we chase her, somehow running into more raiders that I guess just didn't see Ellie on her horse. Yeah, you know, because they're just so easy to miss. And I already mentioned the scene with Joel and Ellie, you know, the most famous one in the game, is immediately followed up with more raiders. Again, fighting them is fun, but it really feels like they were just placed here because people would probably get bored while waiting for the cutscene to end. But the worst case, and I mean the most egregious case of this, is the Left Behind DLC. This is broken up into two halves. You have modern day where Ellie is searching an abandoned mall to find supplies for Joel, and a huge flashback where she and Riley are goofing off in a mall. This story leaves me conflicted because on the one hand, the narrative of Left Behind is really good. It gives us more backstory and insight on Ellie. We finally get to see Riley, who was only mentioned briefly at the end of the main story, and the idea of exploring an abandoned mall under two different contexts is really interesting. The problem is, it once again does not balance the story and gameplay well. The stuff in modern day is the standard gameplay you've done so far for the whole game, and honestly, it's actually really well done. The large mall is a good place to explore, you can find materials easily, and since you're Ellie, you have to be more creative with how you fight raiders and infected. It's a lot of the elements that I really enjoyed about the winter chapter. The stuff in the past is so interesting to watch and boring as hell to play. Walk, cutscene, walk, cutscene, walk, cutscene. Now it's modern day. Play the game for a while, then it's back to walking and watching cutscenes. There's nothing interesting to do during this. And again, the interactions are cute and the story scenes are wonderful. This bit where they're dancing and kiss is so charming, and it hurts all the more when they get infected. But the gameplay is so uninteresting. Only a couple of times is it actually engaging, like this part where you have to fight each other with water guns. It's cute, it's part of the story, and I actually have to use some attention span during it. Otherwise, it just feels like the stuff in the modern day was put here for the sake of having the player actually do something. I don't know how much of a hot take this is, but I honestly prefer how the TV series adapted Left Behind in its own episode. It's pretty much the flashback cutscenes adapted in live action, and it's just as good there as it is here. The only difference being you're not waiting for interesting gameplay to show up randomly. And this is what leaves me so conflicted, because there's so much in this game, both gameplay and story-wise, that works so well. But I feel the way they're integrated together doesn't necessarily mesh well. To go back to this being a cinematic game, I feel like The Last of Us isn't so much a cinematic game, but rather a game with cinematic cutscenes. Yes, there is a difference. Stop looking at me! To me, a cinematic game is one that equal parts tells the story through cutscenes and gameplay. And I'm not talking about games that would prefer to be movies like Heavy Rain, I mean games where the point is to play and enjoy them. You look at games like Metroid Prime and Portal 2, two games that have some cutscenes, but most of the storytelling is told through the gameplay and environments you go through. Or you want something that's a bit more narrative-based? Mass Effect, where half the gameplay is choosing how you want the story to play out. Or if you want something that's very heavily inspired by The Last of Us, the God of War reboot. The game feels like one large continuous journey that has cutscenes and moments of gameplay that aren't too exciting, but the way the narrative is woven into the gameplay just flows so nicely. The Last of Us unfortunately doesn't do that as well, and I'm not gonna give it too much crap for that. I mean, this was basically the first of its kind, so I'll be a bit more forgiving of its balancing issues. But when you have the games I just mentioned, it really does go to show how the gameplay and story, while both good, don't fit perfectly together. I guess I just don't like that people hold it in such high regard because they look at it and say, oh wow, this is like a movie. Me, who played the Wii as a kid and is afraid of pushing buttons. I don't like that many of the compliments this game receives is that it mimics another medium, and to some, that instantly gives it value. It being like a movie should not be the main reason that this game is enjoyed as much as it is. That would be like if I took a book off the shelf and said, I'm not gonna read that, I hate books. And then you get a graphic novel of the same book and say, wow, this is such a better experience, all books should be like this. You see how shallow that is? That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this game. When it came out, everyone scored it insanely high. It was basically the game of the year. But all anyone ever talked about was the story. I mean, really think about it. When this game came out, How many people did you hear say, "God, this game is so fun to play"? If you want an example of the shift in discussion, the original came out receiving tens and hundreds from critics. The Part 1 remake usually received 8s and 9s. Still high scores, but people are starting to realize some of the issues with the game that weren't talked about before, despite the fact that these are basically the exact same game. It goes to show that a lot of the praise this game received were for elements that were the least like a video game. And granted, that's still very much the case. I mean, look at this video. I'm bad at my job. There is genuinely more to talk about with the story because of just how well written and directed it is. While the gameplay, the thing you're doing most of the time, is really good, but it's pretty straightforward, you know what I mean? That being said, it's not like there isn't a good amount of stuff to do outside the main story. Like I said, New Game Plus is always a good time to play through, especially when you have different costumes to unlock. The higher difficulties get insanely precise, and there's even an online multiplayer in older versions. Yeah, this is something about Part 1 being $70 that kind of stings a bit more. The multiplayer mode is just not a thing in this version, and it doesn't seem like it's ever going to be included. Well, I am just so pissed about this thing I never played. Oh wait, yeah, I never played multiplayer mode. It really was just never something that ever interested me. And from what I've seen, I'm not missing much. I can't really speak on behalf of it or judge on its quality, so whatever. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't care. I play The Last of Us for the main campaign. The multiplayer mode is just kind of a neat bonus, and that's all I really view it as. Honestly, I had a ton of fun in this game's photo mode. I genuinely kind of hope to make this my YouTube personality, guy who uses photo mode. That would be my endorsement on the back of the box. The amount of customization is insane, even going as far as being able to add light sources. This is my cinematographer side coming out, but damn it all, I'd pay for a game that was just pose a character, take a picture. That sounds creepy, but think of how cool that would be. This mode really does show off just how fucking gorgeous this version is. I know I already mentioned it, but Part 1 is such a beautiful game. It really took all the best elements from the PS3 and 4 versions and created these vibrant and stunning environments. The music, oh my god, I adore the music in this game. The composer Gustavo Santaolalla, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, brings such an incredible ambience to these areas with his melodies. They range from high stress to extreme emotion to heartfelt joy, to even just pure calm. The multiple variations of the theme's Vanishing Grace and All Gone really showcase his talents the most, in my opinion. You have the same melody but performed differently and using different contexts just makes it perfect. The Vengeance variation of the main theme that plays while you run through the building with Ellie is so good and emotional. When the show was making its rounds, I was really scared they weren't going to use the music from this game since it wasn't in any of the trailers, but thank God that's not the case. This soundtrack is one of the things that really helps solidify this franchise's identity. It's not the catchiest OST in the world or even the most bombastic, but this really is a showcase of what simple subtlety in music can do to enhance your story. And I think that's what sums up why The Last of Us works so well. It's subtle and simple, but executed extremely well. Let's be perfectly honest, the game overall isn't breaking a lot of new ground. The story from a distance seems like ones we've seen before. The gameplay looks like something we've already played. In fact, one could say that we've played it on 3 separate occasions. Conceptually, it's pretty simple, but the way in which it presents its story, builds on its gameplay, it creates an experience that most games could only dream to accomplish. That first playthrough everyone had with this game stuck with them so much, it would even change their entire perception as to what a video game can be. While I may have some issues with how the game balances narrative and gameplay, I can't deny how well done both are. The story in this game is so gripping and emotional, and I wanted to see every single thing that happens in it. The characters are great and performed wonderfully by their respective actors. I love how morally gray the ending is. It fits perfectly with the themes of the story while also being in line with what Joel is as a character. And on top of that, the game is just a ton of fun to play. I love exploring these environments, finding materials and new weapons is satisfying. I love the mixture of combat and stealth. I love the variety of enemies you come across. I love this game, plain and simple. It makes so much sense looking back at how much of a landmark this was in the world of video games. This set the standard going into the PS4 generation of gaming, and many would try to capture what made it work so well. In essence, this is what kind of made the gaming community side with Sony in the long run. You gotta remember, this was released during a time when big games were online multiplayer shooters that came out yearly. This game brought the single player epic back to the mainstream. I really do think if you want to understand what the power of a video game can offer, this is pretty high up on that recommendation board. Now, what version you play, that's up to you, but I'll be honest, one of them is substantially easier to get than the others. I respect the hell out of the original release, but it's over 10 years old, and it really does push the PS3 to its limits. The load times alone are really obnoxious. Plus, the buttons are slightly different on this version, which made muscle memory the worst for me. Also, while this was a graphics landmark, it's definitely a bit fuzzy nowadays. This is all pushing aside the fact that you would need a PS3. Don't bother. Remastered is the most bang for your buck. Its updated resolution and higher frame rate make it a more appealing option just on the looks alone, but it comes bundled with the Left Behind DLC, and it comes with the multiplayer mode if you care about that. It's also dirt cheap, so that's kind of the real reason to get it. You can play it on both the PS4 and 5. You've got options. Part 1 is a good remake, and I'd say it's worth getting if you want the most enhanced version of the game, but that price is a little ridiculous, though $40 isn't a bad option considering it's a complete rebuild of the game. But damn, it's so pretty too. Really, any version will be fine. I'd say that's your call. No matter the version, you're gonna have a good time playing one of gaming's landmarks. That was a lot to get through, but I am really glad I talked about it. I know this series is unfortunately getting a bit saturated, especially in the world of PlayStation, because this is kind of their flagship franchise. I mean, not just with the remake of Part 1, but also announcing and releasing a remaster of Part 2. You can already play the game on your PS5, and it doesn't look that much better yet. Okay, this is a bit much. But understanding this game is really important. There's a reason it became as influential as it did. And between this game and the first season of the HBO series, I'm really excited for what this franchise has in store. Part 2, I'll be honest, that's gonna be a while before I even take a look at it. I'm really in no big rush to play it. I know some of the stuff that happens in this one, I mean, it's been out for a while, and the discourse on this has been fucking insufferable. Honestly, I can't wait for when I start playing this and my only reaction ends up being oh man. It's a game.